She moved like a civilian casual stance. No uniform, just steady hands and sharp focus at the range. Most ignored her. One instructor smirked, but the SEAL commander didn't. He stopped mid-step, eyes locked on the tattoo beneath her sleeve. Not decorative, not for show. It was a classified unit mark, one he hadn't seen in over a decade, because only 3 people were ever cleared to wear it and 2 were dead. If symbols still carry weight, type recognized in silence below. The live fire range at the Coastal Training Facility ran a tight schedule. Civilian observers were rare and civilians on the line rarer. She signed in under just a low, no rank, no branch, approved by someone higher up than the rangemaster. Her gear was plain, her boots worn but clean. She spoke little, kept her eyes forward. The others on the line were mixed new operators, range instructors, a few contractors, mostly male, mostly loud. When she stepped into position 4, a few glanced over. Her stance wasn't textbook, but her draw was smooth. She began her first string-controlled pairs, center mass near 0 spread. Then head shot quicker than most had ever seen. Still, the instructor shrugged. Some civilians get good with time, they muttered. What they didn't see, what they hadn't even considered, was the patch of weathered ink just below her sleeve line. She reloaded with practice calm. Her footwork was deliberate, efficient, not flashy trained. The morning sun cast long shadows across the range. The smell of cordite hung in the air as spent brass clinked against concrete. Standard training day sounds. Routine operations. But there was something different about the woman in position 4. Her breathing pattern never changed. Her grip never shifted. Even between strings, she maintained the same composed posture, weight-balanced eyes scanning, but never tense. The range safety officer, a grizzled master chief named Harrison, found himself watching her more than the others. Not because she was unsafe. Quite the opposite. She was precise in a way that suggested muscle memory built over years, not months. "You ever seen her before?" he asked his assistant. "No, Master Chief, but her paperwork cleared all channels. Someone wants her here." Harrison nodded. In his 23 years of service, he'd learned to recognize the difference between recreational shooters and professionals. This woman, she carried herself like someone who'd done this work when it mattered. But still, she was just another face. No one asked who she was, and she didn't offer. Her second string was even more impressive. Rapid fire, multiple targets, transition drills that required both speed and accuracy. Each shot found its mark with mechanical precision. A few of the younger operators started paying attention. One whispered to his partner, "Think she's former military, maybe, or contractor. Either way, she's got skills." What they couldn't see, what the morning light and careful positioning of her sleeve concealed, was the reason for those skills. The ink beneath her clothing told a story that most would never be cleared to hear. A story of operations that officially never happened, conducted by people who officially never existed. But that morning on a routine training range under the California sun, she was just a civilian observer with exceptional shooting skills and the quiet confidence of someone who'd learned to trust her equipment, her training, and herself. The range master called for a brief pause, safety check, hydration break, standard protocol. She set down her weapon, stepped back from the line, and rolled her shoulder slightly. The motion caused her sleeve to shift just enough for someone with the right experience to notice. Someone who knew what to look for. Some people don't raise their voice. They raise the weight of everything they've survived. If that means something to you, type marked with purpose below. At 0940, a group entered from the upper path instructors, a few senior staff, and at the center, Commander Rohr, head of SEAL Group 6 integration. Rohr walked with confidence. He rarely came to this side of the facility. Most assumed he was there to observe a candidate in lane 1SH, but his gaze drifted to lane 4. She just paused between drills, sweat clinging to her jawline. Her sleeve had shifted slightly. Rohr stopped walking. His expression didn't change, but he didn't blink. They're visible for just a second. An old trident, a partial wave, a number SB3, a unit patch not publicly listed, known only by those who served in its black file operations during the early 2000s. A unit disbanded after a mission gone silent. Of the original members, only 3 were cleared to wear that mark. 2 were confirmed dead, and the 3rd unaccounted for. The instructors noticed Roar had stopped. One asked, "Sir, all good?" He didn't respond, just kept staring, then slowly walked toward lane 4. She didn't turn. She was reassembling her sidearm with calm, fluid motions. Each component handled with the same precision she'd shown in her shooting. No wasted movement, no hesitation. Roar approached, halted 3 foot behind, then took a single step forward, close enough to see the faded initials beneath the ink. His voice, barely a whisper, carried more command than a shout. "Lel." She stood slowly, met his gaze, said nothing. But in that moment of eye contact, volumes were exchanged. Recognition, acknowledgement, the weight of shared knowledge about operations that existed only in classified files, and the memories of those who'd lived them. Roar's mind raced through possibilities. The mission reports he'd read. The personnel follows Mark's status unknown. The debriefs that ended with more questions than answers. SF-3 had been a ghost unit. 3 operators, 1 mission, 0 official survivors. But here she stood. The range had gone quiet. Not the usual pause between drills and uneasy silence, as everyone sensed something significant happening without understanding what. The woman they knew as a Lowell remained motionless. Her weapon now fully assembled, held at low ready. Her stance hadn't changed, but something in her posture suggested she was prepared for whatever came next. Commander Roar, a man who'd led hundreds of operations, who'd faced enemy fire and made split-second decisions that saved lives, took a step back and saluted. The gesture was crisp, formal, and completely unexpected. A senior officer saluting a civilian observer, the kind of moment that would spawn rumors and questions for months to come. She didn't return the salute, didn't acknowledge it with words, but she gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The kind of nod that said, "I see you. I remember, and I'm still here." Roar held the salute for a full 3 seconds, then lowered his hand and stepped back. The range master, Master Chief Harrison, stood frozen. In all his years of service, he'd never seen anything like this. A commander saluting a civilian who somehow commanded that level of respect without saying a word. "Carry on," Roar said quietly, his voice carrying across the range. But his eyes never left the woman in position 4. She turned back to the firing line, loaded a fresh magazine, and continued her training as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Because sometimes recognition comes not through words or ceremonies, but through the acknowledgement of marks that can't be faked, stories that can't be told, and sacrifices that can't be forgotten. By noon, word had spread. The commander saluted a civilian. She didn't speak. He froze like he saw a ghost. Only a few knew the meaning of the tattoo. Fewer knew what S-73 really was. Roar didn't debrief publicly. He didn't need to. He went back to his office and pulled a file that hadn't been opened since 2009. Inside photos, satellite images, a list of names. Code named Trident Echo. Mission classified. Outcome unknown. Survivors, none confirmed except now. There she was, live, still carrying the mark. The file was thin but dense. 3 operators, 1 objective. Deep cover infiltration in a region that officially didn't exist on any military maps. The operation had been planned for months. Each member of SV3 had been hand-selected for specific skills. Lel had been the communication specialist, but her file showed proficiency in everything from demolitions to emergency medical procedures. The last communication from the team had been 18 days into the mission. A brief transmission, objective compromised, proceeding with extraction protocol, then silence. For 6 months, search and rescue operations had combed the region. Satellite surveillance had detected no signs of life, no distress signals, no trace of the team or their equipment. Eventually, the 3 operators were classified as missing in action, presumed dead, but their bodies were never recovered. And now one of them was back. Roar stared at the photograph in the file. It was 10 years old, but the features were unmistakable. The same steady eyes, the same composed expression, the same quiet confidence that had just demonstrated precision shooting that would impress seasoned operators. Back at the range, Lel finished her final magazine, packed her gear with the same methodical precision she'd shown throughout the morning. Nodded once to the range officer, who couldn't even meet her eyes. No one stopped her at the gate. The question started immediately. Who was she? Why did the commander salute? What was that tattoo master? Chief Harrison found himself fielding inquiries from officers who rarely set foot on his range. Everyone wanted to know about the woman in position 4. But Harrison had been in the Navy long enough to recognize classified when he saw it. He gave the same answer to every question above my pay grade. That night, Rohr wrote a single-line message to his direct CO. Lel confirmed. Standing. She returned herself. The reply came 10 minutes later. Do not debrief. Do not interfere. If she speaks, you listen. Weeks passed. She didn't return to the range. But the story lingered. Operators asked to review files on SCV-3 denied. One instructor had the image of the tattoo described from memory. He searched archives for the trident wave emblem. Found nothing. The official records had been scrubbed. SCV-3 existed only in the memories of those who'd been cleared to know about it, and in the ink beneath Aloy's sleeve. One young recruit asked Rohr during field rotation, Sir, who was she? Rohr was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of operations that couldn't be discussed and sacrifices that couldn't be fully acknowledged. She did what we couldn't. She came home carrying us. The recruit didn't understand the full meaning, but he heard the respect in his commander's voice. The kind of respect reserved for those who'd faced the impossible and somehow survived. Later, alone in his office, Rohr opened the file one more time. 3 names, 3 photographs, 3 lives that had been given to a mission that officially never happened. 2 were still listed as missing, presumed dead. But the third was still out there, still carrying the mark that connected her to brothers who'd never made it home. Still carrying the weight of a mission that had cost everything. And still standing. A month later, in the corridor outside the SEAL Memorial Room, a new plaque appeared. No ceremony, no announcement, just a plain brass plate inscribed with a trident, a wave, and beneath it, for the one who carried the mark back alone. Most walked by it without noticing, but the right ones stopped. Some removed their caps. Some placed a hand over their chest. And every single one asked the same question. She's still alive. The answer was always silence, but silence in the military often carries more weight than words. The plaque became a kind of pilgrimage site. Not officially. There were no orders directing personnel to visit it. But word spread quietly through the community. Young SEALs would pause during their first visit to the memorial wall. Older operators would bring their protégés, pointing out the new addition without explaining its full significance. What's that one for? The young ones would ask. That's for someone who came home when no one else could. The questions would continue, but the answers would remain deliberately vague. Because some stories weren't meant to be told in full, only honored in their incomplete telling. Meanwhile, across the country, in a quiet coastal town, a woman rose at dawn. She jogged 5 miles, cleaned her own gear, maintained her own drills, because some units never stop operating. She'd found a small apartment 3 blocks from the ocean, close enough to hear the waves at night, far enough from the main tourist areas to maintain her privacy. Her daily routine was simple. Physical training, equipment maintenance, quiet observation of her surroundings. She didn't seek awards, never claimed veteran status, never used her name in any official capacity. But that tattoo, she never covered it again. At the local coffee shop, she was known simply as Anna. She paid cash, spoke little, and always sat facing the door. The barista, a college student named Marcus, had tried to make conversation a few times. She was polite, but distant, professional in a way that suggested she was used to maintaining boundaries. One morning, he noticed the edge of her tattoo as she reached for her coffee. Military, he asked. She met his eyes once. Thank you for your service. She nodded. Thank you for the coffee. It was the closest she'd come to acknowledging her past with a civilian. But late at night, alone in her apartment, she would sometimes run her fingers over the faded ink, remembering faces, remembering voices, remembering the weight of decisions that had kept her alive when others hadn't been as fortunate. One day, a folded note arrived at Commander Rohr's desk. No return address. Inside one line, "The mark isn't about the unit. It's about who's still carrying it." Rohr read the note 3 times, then placed it in the file with the rest of the SCV-3 documentation. He understood the message. The tattoo wasn't just a symbol of past service. It was a commitment to carry the memory of those who couldn't carry it themselves. Some honors aren't pinned to the chest. They're burned into skin and remembered in silence. If you believe that matters, type "still carrying" below. Subscribe to The Ordinary Heroes, where legacy walks unannounced and silence earns the final salute.